Welcome back to the We Valiant Few podcast. I am your host, Slapshot.
Crossfire's here.
Raptor.
And we also have our co-host joining us again.
Blackbeard. I have my voice back.
Welcome back, Blackbeard. And today, to kick off this episode, we're actually jumping out of order. So we would like to have Panther back on for Amendments 5 through 9. Him being in law enforcement, he would be a great hand with giving us prime examples for those amendments and give us good discussion. So we're actually going to jump to the 10th Amendment for tonight's episode. So to kick things off, we can, of course, go onto the Cornell Law site and get the definition for the 10th Amendment.
You need to say the thing.
The thing that
The
we
thing?
do.
The thing.
What's a thing?
10th Amendment.
Go.
Go.
10th Amendment, go!
Well, I also wanted to add another admin point of, we have a Discord.
Yeah.
It's in the description link. You can check that out so then you can talk to us, have conversations, and do all that.
All that jazz.
Yeah.
So back on to your point. We'll go to the we'll go to the definition, of course.
10th Amendment, go!
10th Amendment, go. All right. The definition of the 10th Amendment reads, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the state, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. I kind of butchered that one.
I'll redo that.
Yeah, please redo that. Yeah.
So the 10th Amendment is the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Which sounds like a mouthful, and we should definitely dumb that down a little bit.
Well, this basically just means that anything that the Constitution explicitly says, or does not explicitly say, are the powers of the federal government, are delegated to or given to either the states or the people.
Yeah, if it's not explicitly said in the Constitution, and this says delegated to the United States, that effectively means like the United States as a whole, federal level.
Yep.
So if it's not explicitly said for that, like I use Supreme Court. There's a whole section there specifically addressing the Supreme Court and
what
whatnot.
they're allowed to do and what they can't do.
Yeah,
and
so that's specifically addressed by the Constitution. But there's certain state level issues, like how states spend their money with education is another one. So they can, the state itself is in charge of dealing with that, and basically anything else that's not explicitly written in the Constitution, and if it's not written in the state's Constitution or founding papers or whatever this particular state does, because they vary, it's to the people respectfully. So
Right.
So what's kind of important about this is it kind of founds our Constitution or our form of government as a decentralized form of government, meaning that all the power is not centralized or controlled or whatever at the top, the pinnacle, the highest point of government. It is, so the power is supposed to be delegated down to the lower echelons, because there's a lot of good things that come out of that, because one person or one guy or one body can't make decisions on literally everything, especially with the size of our country. Like, the federal government doesn't always know how Pennsylvania thinks or how Maryland thinks or how California thinks. And that is delegated down to the state level in order to ensure that they have the best idea for their people.
yeah, they usually know the demographics better. That's like you said, if you've ever seen the map of like the population density of the United States, that way you don't have people that are just on the coasts determining how everything else runs. Because like, you know, even like the way that the country's ran, it's ran off of the coast because DC's ran on the coast. That way those people cannot just immediately know how to run things in the middle of the state, because there's a demographic shift there. So yeah. I think it's really important. I think another point too to bring up that it decentralizes things is the whole amendment process itself, because amendments are written into the Constitution. It becomes part of it, and for an amendment to pass, every state has to agree on it. So something that's not directly given to the federal government by the Constitution becoming the state's authority to grant the federal government that
power,
right, because every state has to agree on every amendment through the ratification process. Otherwise, it's not an amendment.
Is it every state or is it 2/3 states?
No, it's for the amendment. Every state.
I say amendment. Every single state has to agree on it, right?
It's different for laws because that's 2/3, I believe. Is that correct?
Is it 2/3 or is it 3/5?
Oh
not
God,
3/5.
fractions now.
It's not
3/5 compromise.
That's what I think. That's what I'm thinking. But a lot of stuff in government's usually 2/3 because then they call that like a supermajority.
Right.
For different types of laws and whatnot. But for the actual amendments, yeah, it has to be unanimous.
Okay.
So something to think about, you know.
And yeah, why decentralized government or just in anything, whether that be a company or like if you're in the military, squads or like platoon company, all that stuff. It's important because you're decentralizing the command, meaning you don't always know what like I explained before. You don't always know what's going on the ground with like you run a company selling pencils and you are the CEO and these people that are making the pen, there's like a group that makes the pencils and then there's a group that puts the lead into the pencils and a group that cuts the wood or whatever, and you don't always have oversight on that. You may not have any idea how to put lead into a pencil, or you might have no idea how to cut the wood of the pencil. So this decentralized command is you have all these leaders that basically get these jobs done for you and then report back to you, so then you know that the job is getting done.
Yeah, I can speak specifically to this with my background, and it works exactly like how you said. In pretty much all cases, you have divisions that are in charge of particular things depending on the type of business you run, and you give the leaders of those to be like typically a general manager or like a division manager or whatever their title is. You give them a certain set of deliverables, and you're like basically, I mean, most of the time it's basically like, well, that's what needs done. You can deal with HR, you can deal with finance, you can get the money for it, or if you need to figure out something to do this, we can bring it up to higher management or whatever. Most of the time, they just kind of run at their own autonomy because trimming that bureaucracy off makes everything work better. You know, for them to be able to make split-second decisions on their own without having to report back, it's so much faster. It's better for business. It saves money. So that's absolutely how it works.
Blackbeard and I can also attest to that in our location, our shipping warehouse that we work in, where we have a preload sort manager who oversees the entire operation from 3 a.m. to roughly 9 a.m., 10 a.m., whenever the trucks dispatch for the morning. He might not see what's going on different belts, but there are belt managers that manage each individual belt or every 2 belts, so that they can control how many people are on the belt at a time. If another belt is falling behind, then they can discuss between all the belt managers will have a meeting. They'll discuss where they should move certain people so to help out with different volumes of packages per area. So it allows the belt managers to worry about their positions, and then they report up to the preload sort manager to make sure the jobs are getting done correctly. If there's a problem, if they need help somewhere, how to go about it, they can discuss internally and kind of come up with a solution that works best for the morning.
It's really important to have it set up that way too, not only just for the making the workflow better, but there's also a redundancy that exists in that system. Or it's that way, if something were to happen with one belt, in your case, then it doesn't immediately affect the other belts because they don't have their own autonomy to keep working properly.
Right,
And
exactly.
There's also a chain of responsibility as well, because now if one belt fails, then there's a person who is basically accountable
Yep.
for that. Whereas same thing, like if a state is having issues or whatever, that state is accountable. It's not the federal government's fault, or vice versa. And another thing that this amendment does is it kind of hard limits the power of the federal government.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier about the amendment process. Is like it hard limits them, and if they want extra power for X thing, every state has to agree on it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the federal government doesn't just try to do things without having the jurisdiction to do them. That's how the Supreme Court can. That's where a lot of the things that's person versus United States Supreme Court cases. That's where a lot of that originates from that, because they challenge that authority.
Also to mention, having these belt managers for us, it makes our preload sort manager's job way easier because he himself is not managing 10, 11, 12 belts.
It would be impossible.
Right.
There are leadership principles that basically say, like, you can't manage more than effectively manage more than like 6 to 10 people.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, once you get higher than that, it becomes like you kind of get into the weeds of not knowing everyone and not knowing everyone's job and all that stuff.
And then also on top of that, we can relate that to the government, whereas the federal government, it would be hard for them to manage all 50 states.
It'd be impossible.
If the only governing body was the federal government.
Right.
That's why you see a lot of, or at least back in the day, it kind of ran like that. Like whenever there was a king, and then there were lords that oversaw the rest of the king's land.
Those are effectively the warehouse manager and then the belt managers.
Yep.
It's the same thing. Even if the federal government tried to run everything, say there were no state governments, and it was just one big group where you had the federal government running it, they would have delegates of some sort that would run it, and it would effectively create it would make the pseudo-state government thing because of the natural hierarchy of things.
Yep.
It just has to be that way.
This has been going on for years. Like even in probably before like BC times, they've probably been doing things such as this. Like even with the pyramids, for example, they probably did something similar.
Oh, they had to. I can't remember. There was actually people specifically designated to go over particular workloads that were delegated to like little pieces and whatnot for the pyramids. So that absolutely 100% existed. And even think of like
They were like architects too.
that's the name I can think of as an
yeah.
architect. But just like anything else, if you even think like a Boy Scout or something like
You
that.
chisel man.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. Isn't that seriously? Because then even then you usually have one person that's in charge of something. Use the pyramid example. You have the pharaoh, and then you have like the main point workers below that, like the people that are like the project managers for the steps, or the one guy who's doing the interior work and whatnot. And underneath them, they have different sub managers, and it creates a different kind of pyramid, the hierarchy pyramid. And think of how much that just exists intrinsically in life. That's the only way to manage things properly.
Yeah.
That's right. You're gonna say something, Blackbeard?
Yeah, it's human nature to kind of fall into that sort of scheme of things,
The hierarchy.
Yeah, like it's natural to have like a ranking system going on. Like you put a whole bunch of leaders in a room, there's going to be one person that stands out, and they're going to take charge, and then it's going to delegate down from there. Like, oh, this person's going to be my second in command, third, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. All depending on whatever you're doing.
Yeah, it's highly task dependent, of course. And like you said, it just seems like people fall into that. I think it's just because it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And then
Because it works.
Yeah, so then rolling that back into what you're saying, that's kind of how the states are set up, is it decentralizes everything, so you don't have one single hierarchy that everything could fail on. Because the way that's set up, the way that if it's a normal hierarchy, there's one person at the top, or two people at the top or something, and something happens, that whole system falls apart normally. So the way the states work is they each have their own hierarchies that work independently of one another. Again, like the belt thing, so if something happens with one, the others can still work with one another, or work on their own.
It prevents a single point of failure.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's pretty important.
Keeps the machine running.
Yeah. So, a lot of the stuff that comes up with the 10th Amendment are states' rights. And, I mean, there was a civil war fought over states' rights. There's a lot of stuff that goes on today that falls into states' rights, and what is the federal government's job, and what are the state government's job. So, does anyone want to hop in on that? Anyone have a point that they
Talk about electoral votes.
Yeah, so that's one of the big things that's like a hot topic now with, like, it's the state's decision what to do with their electoral votes, especially if it comes down to it. The state can decide, and from my research, the state can even decide against popular vote and just decide who the electoral votes go to if it really comes to a head. I mean, there's a phrase I heard, it's legitimacy versus legality. So it's totally legal to do that, but people may be like, oh wow, that's not legitimate to do that. Totally different debate, but the legality of it is like they decide. That's written into their constitutions. That's how it's done.
And I didn't even know that states could decide electoral votes until today.
That electors are real people.
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Really?
electoral college, they're real people.
Yeah, I did know that actually.
And they can choose, although they'll get serious. Like they're supposed to pick the whoever they're voting.
Right.
They're,
Yeah,
they're
the
delegated for a
majority.
person.
Right. So it's basically taking the popular vote and dumbing it down. So X amount of votes go to this this person, X amount of votes go to this person, and then that one electoral vote is supposed to be casted towards the majority.
Yeah, and most states will all the electoral votes go towards whatever the popular vote is in that state.
And then each of the electors fall towards that. And like
Yeah.
to your point earlier, if they don't, that's called a faithless elector. That
Yeah.
that happens every election. There's usually at least one, at least in modern elections.
Yeah.
That system in particular is kind of antiquated because it's pretty obvious to see why it was invented back in the day. It's at like late 1700s, early 1800s. You didn't have telegraph. It's you sending a message is the same as sending a person to represent a particular area. So that's where it comes from, and it's just kind of something we've grandfathered in for hundreds of years.
Yep. It's pretty funny to think because a lot of the time, or at least a little bit prior to this, I wasn't completely sure if it was people that actually were the part of the electoral college or if it was just like a system. Like the electoral college is a idea type thing that is each state gets whatever, and then those votes are automatically sent depending on how the state decides to send them. That being like I think Maine splits up its electoral votes, and then most other states just send their electoral votes.
All or nothing.
Once,
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to think that it was like almost like a board of people. Like, okay, so they got this many votes, and then they all just sort of like agreed, like, yep, we're swinging this way because this is the way everybody wants us to go.
Well, nowadays with the way electronics are, they could probably do that.
Yeah, it would
There'd be no reason why they
very
couldn't.
easy.
Or like you said, like oh wow, this state here is 20, and they send you an email, but like that's why I prefaced that with this was from a system that was designed before any of those luxuries existed. So, but that's something people don't think about a lot when they think about what's the state, what are states' rights, and it's like that's a big, in starting with something that's really topical. That's a big thing, If it comes down to it, then that's enforced.
Yeah.
I think like a lot of people, whenever they think about just rights in general, especially when it comes down to their state, that it's all federal, pushed. Like it like if it's a part of the federal government, then your state has no say whatsoever with anything. Like like with the mask mandates, like they say like if somebody wanted to mandate a mask, and they would all feel like it would something that they would have to do just because whatever president was saying, oh yeah, you have to do this. Meanwhile, if your state doesn't mandate that to you, you wouldn't have to.
Well, actually, it even goes further than that because the federal government doesn't have any official power to do that, regardless of who's trying to do it, who's trying to push it. In the federal government, they're not allowed.
I get that, but like that's just how people would fall suit though, because certain people just don't understand how states' rights work.
That's what I said earlier about they do try to push things that are not constitutionally allowed at all. It just depends on someone willing to stand up and be like, hey, this is protected underneath the 10th Amendment. Then you get a Supreme Court case.
There's a lot of low information people that kind of just function in society, and they learn what they learned in history class and in school,
and that's it.
Like they don't follow it, they don't pay attention to it, they don't actually know like the nuances of it. Like we're by no means lawyers, but this stuff is important to like everyday life and understanding what is allowed, because if we don't understand what is allowed in writing in the Constitution, then basically like it's open field day for whatever the government wants to
feel whatever they feel should be done. And back to your point with the mask mandates, as far as I'm concerned, I don't really think there's something like that in a state constitution either. So it'd have to be or a state constitution or founding papers or whatever. So to get into that, it would have to be passed by the state legislature to be officially amended into that. And if that's not the case, then the right of that falls to the people, as explicitly said in the 10th Amendment. So, a mask mandate...
Well, that's why you don't see these mask mandates as law.
Yeah, because they're not law.
They're not law, and it's kind of funny because I remember a story. My brother, He was at a gas station getting food or something, and he was standing in line, wasn't wearing a mask, and some random lady walks up to him and is like, "Why are you wearing a mask?" And he was like, "'Cause I don't have to." And she was like, "It's a law. You have to wear a mask." And he was like, "It's definitely not a law because it is actually straight up unconstitutional for them to pass a law on it, and it's also just not a law, period." So I mean, she huffed and puffed and walked away, and then the clerk like apologized. But I just thought that was a funny.
And then she blew the gas station down.
Peacefully.
yeah, peacefully protested the gas station down. So that, I mean, those are just some examples of what, of you know, that's
low information people.
Yeah, low information people. Another thing that really comes up too with that, and I know this is something a lot of people asked about, is like, why can National Guard just not walk in and stop a riot? That falls under the same thing as the mask mandates. It's like that there's not any explicit permission for the federal government to call the National Guard in wherever they feel like, whenever they feel like, unless they explicitly go and call like martial law, or they call in like the Insurrection Act or something like that that declares that as a particular kind of threat. But that opens up an entire huge Pandora's box of things. So that's why you see the places like Portland and whatnot, that they can't just walk in and deal with things however they feel like, because that's limited by the state's rights, where the state's rights specifically, or the state's constitution or whatever, again explicitly gives them the right to call the National Guard in if there's an issue.
Yeah, and if that was the case, if the state called the National Guard, then they would be able to go places other than a federal area, like a federal building.
Yeah, because the federal government has authority over federally owned property. Again, we'll use Portland like a federal courthouse. They have the ability to be there because that's federally owned land. But like you said, you can't go anywhere else unless they have not only explicit permission, but they're asked to, because that's written in with that's protected underneath the 10th Amendment.
That's right.
And if they were to do that, then, like you said, that would be opening up another can of like other rights that would be, you know, being stepped on.
Yeah, you run into a lot of issues with that. But that could go the other way too. If there's not something written in law for the federal government, then the states can kind of really take advantage of that. I know we talked earlier, or we had talked pre-podcast about what's going on in Oregon with the legalization of different drugs and decriminalization of drugs. I know you specifically, Slapshot, were talking about that.
Yeah, and then in New York as well. So if you were to get caught with heroin or methamphetamines, you do not get a felony for that anymore. So,
but whereas if you are charged federally, so like there's a lot of nuance that goes into stuff like this. So if your case is settled like in a local court, then obviously you won't get hemmed up for that because it is legal in your state. But if you committed a crime that would call in a federal agent to investigate, and they also found that during their investigation for the other crime that was a federal thing, and they found that you had even marijuana, because marijuana is still not federally legal,
right?
They could still charge you federally, but the state wouldn't charge you.
Is it federally illegal?
What meth and all that stuff?
Yeah, is there?
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
I didn't know if that was for internal, or if that was just like they dealt with customs or not.
No, so the debate with, like, for example, marijuana has been going on for the past few years when medical marijuana became a thing.
It's been longer than that, yeah.
Yeah, besides the point, it's more so states passing it as legal, but it's still illegal federally.
So that actually comes into something I wanted to talk about. It's specifically written in with Article 4, Clause 2 of the Constitution. It's called the Supremacy Clause. So what that does is that means that it holds that all laws enacted by the state governments have to comply with the Constitution. And then whenever a law is passed by a state that conflicts with federal law, say a state just passes outright, oh yeah, we're going to legalize all marijuana, but the federal government's like, oh yeah, well, marijuana is still illegal, then the federal government's law takes precedence over the state law. So that's why the states can't just pass their own laws to basically totally eliminate the Constitution. They try.
If we talk about like the Second Amendment, for instance, there's a lot of states that make it near impossible. Like I know New York, New Jersey, California.
Big California.
You have to put whenever you request a concealed carry permit, you have to have a reason to have it. Like some kind of reason, whether that be it can't just be self-defense. Like
I think whenever you go in there, it's like because they have the check mark the list on our state's paper too.
Yeah.
Like it's like self-defense, hunting, sporting,
all kinds of
things like that.
You can even take a step further than that. It's like, does the federal Constitution say anywhere in it that you need a permit to conceal carry a gun? Is that written in the Constitution anywhere? No. I mean, as far as I know, it's not. So the very concept.
Well, hang on.
We are digging deep.
So they're not with the permit. I don't think they are necessarily. They're putting a barrier, per se, to the Second Amendment, but they're not explicitly denying it, and I think that's where a lot of this stuff comes from.
That's where they're able to pass.
I'm glad you finished your thought. So, no, of course they did not talk about concealed carrying in the Constitution because they only had like muskets,
That would
right?
be
They
fantastic.
had musket pistols.
Get the hell out of here.
They're open carrying that. Most of they probably have swords on them. I mean,
What about their overcoats? Thug life.
Back in the day,
God.
they had
Like,
legitimate.
musket out,
Like back in the day, they had legitimate duels. Like Alexander Hamilton died in a duel.
I get this.
Right.
He got the flint Glock
Because there was a president. You can check. You can look this up, but there was I can't remember what president, but Alexander Hamilton did not like what this president was doing. So Alexander Hamilton challenged him to a duel.
It was Burr, wasn't it?
Yeah, Burr.
Man, if we only had those today.
Hang on.
Yeah, and then so they got on a duel,
He was a
and
VP. Yeah, if I remember that correctly. But like you said, duel and
Alexander Hamilton, he lost.
Sorry about your luck, man.
Which kind of sucks because
Now you're
Alexander
leaking.
Hamilton is the guy that wrote the majority or a large portion of the Federalist Papers.
Yeah, but back then duels were 100% legal as
Yeah,
long as both parties
there are
agreed
duels.
to it.
There are states that still have dueling laws that are like 100% still in the law code.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I mean, I doubt if it was ever brought up and like, hey, we are dueling.
We're dueling for this piece of land.
Yeah.
Well, if that was the case, I want to take this. We're gonna duel.
So that is
Winner takes all.
So that is a ballpoint pen duel. Yuki boy.
Yep.
I mean that definitely puts in it. But I was playing the devil's advocate with that, of course, where it's like that's not explicitly written in. But that goes back to what we said in our Second Amendment podcast. Is like they just pass all this little tiny nuanced stuff
That make it harder and harder and harder.
Chip
They're not
away, like you said, a death by 1,000 cuts.
They're not saying explicitly, no, you can't have that.
Texting.
We're saying you can have it, but you have to go through all this paperwork and all this time and all this stuff. And is it really worth it for you to do all that, or can you just like live without it?
And plus, you have to give us a whole bunch of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the tax stamp's federal.
Yeah, the tax, because, and that comes from the
ATF.
The ATF and the Gun Control Act.
Yeah. I think that was the 34 Act that enacted the tax stamp. If I remember that correctly.
And at the time, the $200 hasn't changed, but
But that was not adjusted for inflation.
no.
Oh my
At the
goodness.
time, it was $200.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna while you're pointing. Yeah. I'm gonna
So to jump back a little bit, Aaron Burr killed Hamilton in a duel.
So it was Burr, yeah.
And he was vice president
Okay,
to
that's-
Thomas Jefferson.
Yep. Okay. Then I did remember that right.
And
That's pretty crazy.
let's see here.
Does
Aaron-
it say like the reason why they got in a duel in the first place?
Oh my goodness.
No, but it says that Hamilton was killed in the 1804 duel, and when charges of treason were brought against him in 1807. Interesting.
I'd like to look more into that. But to tie together our thought on the not being adjusted for inflation, the $200 tax stamp.
Yeah, so adjusting for inflation from 1934, when they passed that to 2020, if something back then cost you $200, it'd cost you $3,886 and change. So you're talking a rate of inflation of like 1,850%. So what was the that's just to keep it going? So in 1934, average income for 1934. So this is not adjusted for inflation. So the average income. Wait, let me see if that is adjusted for inflation. That better not be.
Is that a year?
Yeah, 1936. So this was here. It does not say these are adjusted for inflation.
It looks about.
Average wages per year were like 1,519.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, see the cost of a new house. Okay, yeah. So in 1933, the average income was like $1,500. So the actual tax stamp is like what, 2 months worth of wages approximately. So
Jeez.
So like you're saying the tax stamp being a federally mandated thing was really expensive.
Well, that's not a month. That's a year.
That's what I said. 2 months out of your year approximately would be the cost of a tax stamp.
Which is
That's an oof. Average cost. There we go. 1935. A cost of a gallon of gas was 10 cents. So you could buy 2,000 gallons of gas for that. I don't. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
You're right.
You're right. And the average cost of to rent a house was $26 a month. So your entire year worth of rent essentially was the cost of that tax stamp. And a loaf of bread cost 9 cents. So you buy 2,000 loaves of bread.
It's a lot of bread.
Let's get this bread.
You couldn't buy that in the Depression.
No, you couldn't. No. That's not even accounting for the Depression. Yeah. So back to what you said. They pass all these things to make it harder for people to get. I kind of find it ironic that they put the tax stamp on the machine gun to make it more hard to get, but the only people that were affected by that were the
people
average
that
people
already couldn't get it.
And the people they even passed all this gun control law for were like the gangster types who had the money to be able to buy the tax stamps. So it didn't solve the problem.
Yeah, this stuff never solves a problem, which is a little bit off topic from the 10th Amendment, but we followed that strand all the way down, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. Second Amendment Part 3.
Success.
Hey,
Absolutely not. We talked enough about that.
No, we did not.
No.
All right.
We can never stop talking about it because it's infinitely relevant.
It's every day you live and breathe it.
I do.
But the 10th Amendment, the 10th Amendment is in all things for the most part. Like we just did.
It
we
applies everywhere with everything.
Yeah, so like it's one of the ones I think a lot of people really don't give a lot of credence to. Like they just, 10th Amendment's the last bill with the Bill of Rights. They kind of shrug it off, but it really does provide a lot of protection for the states themselves
and the people.
And the people. Yeah, now it's going to
Everything trickles down.
And if the states don't explicitly have it written, then it really protects the people.
Yeah.
And
the states have like their own domains too that are written out, that are defined in the Constitution as well, of like education and stuff like that, public transport,
welfare is done through
welfare,
state.
State welfare.
That's what I was going to try to see what things were.
What are all the delegated powers of the state that the federal government
So
doesn't
there's state sovereignty resolutions.
Is Medicare?
Medicare itself is a government, federal government mandated thing.
But is there?
You mean like the distribution of the money?
Distribution of It
would have to be done on a state level.
It would have to be because the way that for the cost of living in each state is different, so it would have to be.
But then again, you have the IRS that deals with all your taxes, and most people just send their money to the IRS, and the IRS sends it back to the state.
Maybe that was kind of like an easy way to do it. I'd like to have one area that manages all the tax. Is there state IRS or is there federal?
It's just federal.
So like it would be like each state has their own department of business or something along those lines that deals with the actual taxes. Like, I know what ours is called, and I know where it's at, but again, to be anonymous, I'm not going to say what it is. But now that I'm thinking about it, you don't send, like, sales tax is not done through the federal government. That's done through your state government.
State sales tax.
In fact, sales tax even comes down to a county by county basis.
Yeah, it does.
Because neighboring counties have different sales tax, and that all goes through the state. They all get sent to the place everybody knows that deal that's in charge of the state, and that's all collected there. You don't send it to DC. You send it directly to them.
And there's a difference. So, like, on your paycheck, some states don't have income tax, some states do, but there's also a federal income tax.
Yep, totally separate.
It's totally separate. So you're getting money pulled out from the state and the federal government
and cities
and your city. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's all falls into the tax. So it kind of also is a double-edged sword, because there's just a lot of places that can just take your money.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you ever looked at your pay stubs, like
it shows you, like, line by line who's taking your money and where's it going, or not where it goes, but who takes it.
Yeah, I was trying to see if I could pull up something that is specific.
I wonder if they do that on purpose. You know, it's just like, oh, you don't know whether you're this.
No, I mean, they do it on purpose because you have a right to know who's taking your money.
Oh, I know, but I'm just saying. But there's just so many, and then they're like, people will get complacent. They're like, oh, I don't want to look at this.
Yeah.
Well, something that goes into Social Security, and you pay into that and get it back whenever you retire.
Is Social Security state run? Or is it a federal pool? I think it's a federal pool.
I think Social Security is federal.
Yeah.
If I'm thinking about how that works and how, like, the background of that is, I would think that is.
Yeah, that's most likely. And it makes more sense because it was passed by FDR, who was on the Democrat Party, which is usually bigger government, more centralized power rather than decentralized.
Yes, Social Security benefits are from federal and are subject to federal income tax as well.
Yeah, it says.
So they're taxing the tax money that they. so it's you work, you make your money. Federal government taxes it, puts part of that tax into a pool of money that people from Social Security or people on Social Security benefits receive. But whenever they receive it, it's taxed again by the federal government, and it goes back into how much tax? Why all this tax?
Oh, that's a great.
Stop taxing me.
That's a different one.
It's my money, and I need it now.
So Hamilton actually addressed in the Federalist Papers about explaining the limitations of why they wanted to limit powers from a proposed federal government. So it's describing that the acts of the federal government were only binding if the states and the people granted those powers, which is what I was saying earlier just by my observation. But that's what Hamilton said, and specifically says that those type of those acts that exceeded those are void and of no force. So
basically, if the federal government says it goes beyond its reach and says, like, you're not allowed to, you have to wear a mask, they're null and void because they literally are unlawful.
Yeah, because I mean, agree with masks or disagree with masks, that's just literally how it's written.
Yeah, I don't have to make this clear, if we're talking about masks, I don't necessarily have a problem with wearing a mask. I have a problem with the state and federal government telling me that I am forced to wear a mask or suffer a penalty of money or a penalty of your time in jail.
Yeah, without having the legal authority to do so.
Yeah, it's not allowed.
Imagine going to jail for not wearing a mask.
People have.
Really?
Yes, they got arrested.
Yeah.
They went to like a school football game or whatever, and some lady wasn't wearing a mask, and they called the police. The police, and given this is a different kind of situation because it is school property, so then the school can say you have to wear a mask. But
from what state property, yada yada yada, yeah.
Or more relevant, there was a gym that was open during the lockdowns and stuff.
I was gonna go into this.
Yeah, and he basically, the guy said, it is wholly illegal for you guys to be doing this, to force me to close my business. And this goes into state or federal government forcing you to close. There's nothing in state governments or the federal government that allow them to close close privately owned businesses. So he stood his ground and he said, no, I'm not going to close, and he kept his door. In fact, he took the doors off of his building.
I did see
and
that.
he slept in there for days with his co-owner or whatever. And he filed suits and all this stuff, and somehow through our legal system, he didn't. They said that the state had the right to do that. And I should look into like how they rolled on it.
Yeah, well, you'd have to look into that because each state is going to have different things written into it about what they're able to do or not. But I would imagine that.
I don't think the founders, whenever they wrote the Constitution, thought that they would allow something like that. That is, I think that's overstepping.
Gross violation of human rights on that one.
I think that takes away people's, right to pursue happiness.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can speak
Yeah.
firsthand that it absolutely does.
Yeah.
Because we're still seeing the ramifications of that.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
And that falls into the pursuit. It is your business. That is your pursuit of happiness. And
No.
now these states, the state and the federal government, not so much the federal government, but a lot of the state governments are limiting the ability of the people.
Well, and I guess so. If a state locks down and they don't have the explicit right to lock down as written, per their founding papers, that would, based on the 10th Amendment, that would fall down to the people whether they want to lock down or not.
Yeah, and then it would also fall down, and we can go into this the whole time because there are police in order to enforce a lockdown, you need a police force to do so, and in order to do that, you have to have a police force that is so blind to the actual law code and the Constitution, the state Constitution, and how all of that works. And we also and part of their oath, partisan lawyers, and all this that are saying that somehow this stuff is okay for the federal government to make me wear a mask or to close my business. That's wholly insane. That's not.
It's clear cut written that it's supposed to be the other way.
Yeah.
And the thing is they can go and do this type of stuff, and until somebody says, "Oh, hey, you can't do that because of the 10th Amendment," which then promotes typically a circuit court case or a Supreme Court case. Before that, they just do it. And then people are like, "Oh, well, they've done it X amount of times. That must be the way that things are done."
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing about educating yourself is you have to know what your rights are in order to protect them.
Yeah, I think that's for any topic we go over.
We can talk. Yeah,
agreeing with us or not, I think what you just said
Yeah.
is one of the most critical points that you can make.
We can talk about right and wrong all day in the sense of it's probably a good thing that we wear masks, or it's probably a good thing that we social distance or stuff like that. But that doesn't change the fact that the federal government or state government can't mandate you, force you. What happened to my body, my choice?
Oof.
Yeah, but this is where this gets funky, because to sort of play devil's advocate with that is where your rights end, mine start.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but it's also your right to not come near me if you choose. If you're so quote unquote. I mean, I'm not talking quote unquote.
Yeah,
if you're so afraid. You can.
It is a mutual thing. We don't. Whenever we walk in public. I don't think anyone purposefully walks. I mean, there's some people might, but walks in the personal space or bubble or whatever of other people that are around. There's almost a understood barrier around everyone, and we all try to.
Have you been in New York City?
Oh no, but
New York is space limited. Your sidewalks can't be 2 miles wide. So that's quite an extreme case. But if you're not moving around just trying to get somewhere like everybody else can,
if there's room, people are going to
they're going to space out.
They're going to space out.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I'm not necessarily infringing on your right because I'm not wearing a mask, because there is also a like behavioral distance that we all kind of follow through.
A little smooth buffer there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's something. It's like that. It comes down to what I always tell people. It's like you get people and they get real offended by stuff. It's like, okay, is it suddenly my job to care about what you're offended about? I mean, sure, that might make you feel better, but it's not my. I mean, that's not my responsibility. Which kind of falls into what you're saying. It's like it's not my responsibility for you to want to come near me, or you just happen to come near me because I may do something quite a bit or do differently than you. I mean, it's kind of a really backwards way to say
But
that.
I don't think you're necessarily infringing on anyone's rights, especially whenever there's not the information out on our current dilemma is not the most clear cut.
Hazy at best.
Yeah.
So.
I wasn't arguing I totally agree.
No, you're.
I totally
yeah,
agree.
You
But
even preface.
but there is
yeah.
definitely people out there that use that same phrase or whatever to definitely combat that whole thing.
Well, then in the same breath, they'll come back and contradict something that totally goes against it, and you're like, you scratch your head because you really don't know what to say. It's like you literally just sat there for 15 minutes, ran out of breath, explained to me why you believe this. And in the same breath, you totally contradicted yourself.
And people don't see that.
No.
Yeah, they don't know it because they're so hard headed.
emotionally-
They're like you said, emotionally invested enough to where they're really thinking about what the hell they're saying.
Oh, I think the ability to look at things objectively too is like all but gone.
Yeah.
I think sitting there and looking at something, because like I can sit there and I can look at something that I completely disagree with, and I can sit there and I can look at it objectively. It's like, oh well, I don't know. Say this is a blue, and I don't like blue. I'll sit there and be like, okay, that's blue. And
As much as I don't like
as
blue,
as much as I do not like blue,
that's blue.
that is still very blue. Or be like, well, this is kind of a cool thing. It's blue. I mean, it's like, well, maybe I can like blue in this case. And that's just a super crude example that just happened to me in front of me. But you can sit there and objectively look at it. It's like, okay, I sit there, reevaluate my position on something, and it's like, yes, I'm still totally saying this is still a bad idea, and I'm against it. I'll be like, oh well, maybe that's changed a bit. But other people were like, yep, steadfast. It's like, you're bad.
That is purple.
Bad.
That is purple.
Yeah, it's purple. You're bad. Why are you bad? Because that's purple. It's like that has nothing to. It's purple. You're bad.
What?
What? Why?
What math? Where is this coming from?
That sounds like a lot of far left.
No, that's not even far left.
No.
There's far right. That's
There's
like
far
that
right
too.
that are
like,
the same way.
Why do you? It's like, what's that opinion from? The Squawk Box told me to tell you that. I personally know somebody that literally says, he's like, well, on the Squawk Box they said this and that and the other.
The Squawk Box.
That's a TV.
Oh.
That is a TV.
Do you know those like some
Slightly
newfangled English?
He is most certainly not new.
That is boomer term right
Oh
there.
yes, boomer speak.
I think this, if I'm not
I
mistaken,
resent
this
you.
weekend is his 90th birthday. So
Oh my, that's
He's-
more than
he's
boomer.
extra boomer.
he's like, oh yeah, the Squawk Box. I heard them talking about this. I'm like, yep, I bet you did.
All right, so but to tie it all that
Yeah.
long ramble back together, just to the very top point of before that all went downhill right there, to where we went. Education of our rights is super important. Like people think high school is super underrated, but it's really not. Like high school teaches you building blocks of life.
We also have to be very careful with high school too, because we currently, I know in one of our
Oh
schools,
god, yeah.
Yeah.
they're teaching stuff that has absolutely nothing to do with history, and they are basically just posturing with the idea
They're being
of,
racist. There's
Yeah, they're-
nothing
yeah,
short of it.
they're
I mean,
being- yeah.
We'll get to that point in a second.
Yeah.
In a second. But to finish my thought, high school would teaches you building blocks of life, and history class is one of them. Teaches you American history, because if you don't learn your history repeats itself.
Oh,
So-
you just don't know how to function. Like you don't know the laws or where your laws.
Yes,
Which is why it
I'm getting
repeats
there. I'm
itself,
getting
yeah.
there. It's important to know why things exist for a reason. It's important to know why laws are in place for a reason and how they all came about. And it's incredible that some people
People are so negligent,
Right.
and ignorant.
You live in
to
this
any of
country,
stuff.
but you don't think about any of the laws that are in place, why they're in place, or the rules that make them in place and how they got
and
there
why
for
they're
a reason.
good,
Yes.
and why.
I think that's the best way you could put it. Why they are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead people just
Because there was a reason initially. Whenever that law was made, there was a reason for it.
We can
so-
get into laws
yeah.
for a long time. I think in Florida, or no, oh god, is it? I think it might be. It's in Florida. It's illegal to have a monkey on a unicycle smoking a cigarette. I think
Well, somewhere that's illegal to like change a light post with a giraffe or something.
in PA it's illegal to
To sleep on top of your fridge.
outside.
Outside. But so to tie that into states' rights and federal rights,
man.
there's nothing in the federal government that says that they can stop you from doing that.
From sleeping on your fridge for whatever fucking
Yeah.
reason you
But
want.
there may be something in the state government that happens to do with like public indecency or stuff like that. That maybe that is considered sleeping on top of your fridge is
These
public
men go
indecency.
down as legends.
I see Crossfire going on his phone now. He's going into these ridiculous laws now.
I know the sleeping on the fridge thing.
You can't
is
fire a
illegal
cannon
in
at a
PA.
wedding, I think, in a certain state. I don't remember what state that is,
What?
though. Yes.
But there are and you can look at this in the military. Sometimes you'll see like weird signs on things that say like don't do this weird thing that no one would really think to do, but it's there. It's a rule anyway.
What did you find?
I got a whole bunch of them here. This is strange U.S. laws. Alabama. It's illegal to wrestle a bear in this state. California.
I wonder how that became a thing.
California. Sunshine is guaranteed by a law.
Guaranteed.
Yeah, it says so
What?
far they've made good on this promise. It also says a vehicle without a driver may not go faster than 60 miles an hour. So what if
crash tests?
what if it's on a trailer?
Wait, what?
It says a vehicle without a driver may not go faster than 60 miles an hour. And then it further goes says how an unmanned vehicle would get that fast in the first place is not explained. Florida, it's illegal to sing in a public place while wearing a swimsuit. Pretty sure people are like that. Or people violate that. It says if you leave an elephant tied to a parking meter, you must pay the meter or you'll be charged with a ticket.
I'm sure that happened in like the 1800s, 1900s, and some rich dude brought an elephant in, and they were just some dude was just like.
I was gonna say Ringling
you
Brothers
talking
Circus
about?
probably
It's
came by
inspected.
and left their elephant tied to a parking meter.
Massachusetts happy hour drinks specials are illegal. Which I thought. Yep. New York, there was a
Interesting.
$25 fine for flirting. And also, New York, a person may not walk around on Sundays with an ice cream cone in his or her pocket. Yeah. New York City, you may not greet another person by putting one's thumb to the nose and wiggling the
What?
Yeah, it says in New York City, you may not greet another person by putting one's thumb to the nose and wiggling the fingers.
Okay.
Not only does it look silly, it will land you in trouble with the law. See, Jersey, illegal to slurp your soup. And then also says in New York, New Jersey, it is illegal to sell ice cream after 6 p.m. unless the customer has a note from his doctor. Yeah, there you go, PA.
Tonsils.
PA, you cannot sleep on top of the refrigerator outdoors, but you may sleep on top of any refrigerator you want in the privacy of your own home. Illegal to sing in the bathtub.
Hell yeah.
And also in PA, you may not catch a fish with your mouth.
No more extreme noodling.
Oh shoot! They got me.
Texas, it says you can be legally married by publicly introducing a person as your husband or wife 3 times.
What?
Yep. It's also illegal to flirt in the city of San Antonio. Unclear what would happen if you flirt with somebody while introducing them as your spouse 3 times. Well,
But these are all crazy laws, and I'm sure there was a reason for them to exist in the first place. Like something happened, and someone was upset about it, and it became a law. But that goes into like the federal government can't mandate stuff like that. But I'm sure all of these things, as crazy as they are, fall under like a certain state right that allows them to have control over that one thing. So maybe sleeping on top of a refrigerator in PA is a like public indecency thing for whatever.
Like you said, discharging a gun, cannon, or revolver at a wedding is illegal.
Where's
in
that
PA. In PA.
Okay.
Yep, because you said earlier, the PA is kind of the one we kind of have to gravitate towards because this are the weird ones. In Ridley Park, it is illegal to walk backwards while eating peanuts in front of a Barnstormers auditorium while performance is going on.
They're just so suspicious.
It's because something like that happened. And I don't know what obviously there's probably a story behind it.
You know what? I bet you I know the story.
I hope
Some
so.
guy was walking backwards.
Memes didn't exist back in the day, so that's how they memed people.
Well, there are memes like, you know how whenever you're in high school and you like wrote on the wall like so and so was here.
Yeah.
Well, there are like cuneiform hieroglyphs or whatever cuneiform like from Sumerians that are translated to so and so was here. So the human race has been memeing for quite some time.
Memeing before memeing was memeing.
I looked it up. They said the sleeping atop a refrigerator outdoors thing was, they said most likely was from some type of vagrant related thing.
Vagrant?
Like a homeless person?
Oh, okay. That probably makes
I mean, that makes a little bit more context. It makes a little more sense in that context.
That's not what I would have thought about. Somebody's drunk antics.
Which would make more sense, honestly.
Yeah, to me, like
Because if I'm homeless, I would sleep in the fridge, not on the fridge.
You can fit in the fridge.
Fit in a fridge. You must have a nice fridge.
You take all the
You're
shelves out.
privileged. Pay your tax.
All right.
Pay your tax or serve your sentence.
Pay your tax.
I mean, chest freezer. But it is specifically
open,
said
like Groucho.
Refrigerator, so.
Just put a heater in there and then you can just turn it into an oven.
A heater and air conditioner. Ooh.
Living conditions. A pillow and a blanket and you're good to go.
Coming soon with Valiant store. We Valiant Fuse shop.
Chest fridges.
To a store near you.
To a store near you.
I think we're good. So
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with this one. I like the new context of this. We're actually having a lot of fun with these.
So to tie it all together, the state has certain things that fall under its jurisdiction. The federal government has certain things that fall under its jurisdiction, and the people have certain things that fall under its jurisdiction. And there are rights, like you see in the Constitution, there are rights granted to the people. Like the Second Amendment is granted to the people. The
First Amendment.
Yeah, the First Amendment is granted to the people, and so on and so forth. If you can,
Pretty much all the Bill of Rights are granted specifically to the people on that one. Yeah.
But this shows the difference, the delegation of power between the federal government and the state government, and why. I mean, not to go into a super heavy point, but a lot of people blame like the president for all of the issues in the country, but he only has so much power, and I mean his power has grown throughout the years since the founding, but there are checks and balances on the executive branch as well as what the president and the federal government can do to the states and to the people.
Well, there's checks and balances not only from the federal government to the states and people. There's checks and balances inside of the federal government, so you have multiple layers there. And to add on to your point too about it's really important that this creates the system. It also lays out very clear, cut and dry what you should or like how they relate to one another. So while if it's not explicitly written in the U.S. Constitution, if it's not written in my state's Constitution, then it comes to me. Or it's not written in the U.S. Constitution, but it's in the state's Constitution, so that's the state's way to deal with it. It explicitly gives the roadmap for that, which is why it's really important.
And the whole point of laws shouldn't be to limit what you're allowed to do. They should be to provide more freedom, provide more avenues of freedom.
right.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Literally.
Well, those words I hear most often from representatives like Dan Crenshaw. He says that a lot.
Respectable man.
Yeah. So with that, I think we can pretty much end it.
Yeah, we're good to go there. So thank you all for tuning in. We are on all major podcast platforms. Wherever you get your podcasts, you can probably find us there. We're actually also on YouTube now.
We just went to YouTube.
Yeah, so if you're a YouTube guy or girl, check it out. We are probably search us. We Valiant Few Podcast on YouTube. Give us a listen there if you so choose. Also, in the show notes, you can find our link for our Discord. Give us a join on our Discord. You can get involved with our discussions.
Yeah, talk to us. Ask us questions.
Give us feedback. Any feedback provided, criticized or not. Yeah, super helpful. Yeah, we'll take anything.
Any further points too and stuff that we missed is a good thing definitely to post in our Discord, or any ideas for future podcasts. Yeah, because the amendments are going to run out here soon. We have a couple ideas. We have more ideas after that, but we'd like some feedback on what we're doing for sure.
With that, thanks for listening, and hope to see you next time.